Welcome to another virtual edition of Twos in Training, sponsored by Preferred Equine. I'm Jaimi MacDonald, and tonight we'll be catching up with Jim Campbell. In 2019, he earned over $3.1 million in purses, and tonight he'll be giving us a sneak peek into his 2020 freshman, some returning horses, and maybe some insight on his pizza-making skills.
At Preferred Equine Marketing, we've got you covered. From representing you at the yearling and mix sales, to taking you to winner circles around the globe. Preferred sale graduates, like these champions, come from putting the great horses we're privileged to sell into the hands of the best buyers in the business. Reach out to Preferred and let us cover you with success.
Welcome back, and Jim, thank you for joining us on our virtual Twos in Training this evening.
Thank you, Jaimi. Thank you for having me on.
It's a very exciting time to do it virtually because we get to actually connect where usually I wouldn't be able to connect with some of our trainers in the States. So it's nice for me to meet and get to know all of you south of the border.
I wish it was under different circumstances, but we have to deal with the hand that we're dealt.
For sure. And speaking of that, how are you guys doing? How are you and your family doing with the pandemic right now? And how has it kind of changed your day-to-day lives?
Well, we've been blessed with our family. Nobody's gotten sick or anything. My wife, she's pretty much she stays right around the house. Our son James, he's still working. He's in construction and essential. So both him and I have been working. So our lives haven't really changed a whole lot, with the exception for me not racing, but working all during the day and everything like that. And it's for me, it's business as usual with the exception of racing. My days are filled, between training at the barn and then, doing book work and stuff like that in the afternoons. The days are filled. So, but, speaking, I know for my wife, she wants to get going, so where she can go out and do things. And speaking with some of my neighbors, they're the same way. Everybody's starting to get a little antsy. They want to get out.
Yeah, I think everyone is kind of in that same boat. Here in Ontario, we got some great news today because it looks like our tracks can start up racing the first week of June. We're in our stage 1 of kind of getting the economy back and ready. So hopefully you aren't too far behind.
I hope we're real close. I know the SPOA of New Jersey's been working really hard, and Jeff Gorell too, to get something going, either Meadowlands, Vernon, and Tioga. So hopefully we're right behind, and we can get something going in June as well.
And how do you think that this closure of the racetracks and kind of the pushback of the racing season will affect the stake races and kind of the whole season for 2020?
It's hard to say right now because we don't know what the schedule is going to be. If in an ideal world, if we get back racing in June and they can reschedule the races that we missed, and the stake season goes a little bit longer than it normally does, I don't think anybody would be too upset by that, because you'd still get to race. It would just be a different schedule. And, that's what I'm hopeful will happen, is that they'll just extend it a little bit. There might be some conflicts where, you might have to pick and choose whether you go to a sire stake race or you go to a major stake race. But I don't think that's not the worst thing that could happen to us too, because it's going to spread the money around a little bit more. Trainers and owners are going to have to make a decision of which one they want to go for. And, so I'm hopeful that's what'll happen, but I guess until we see exactly when everybody's going to be back racing, they can't really finalize any schedules until then.
Yeah, especially because we have that cross-border connection where so many of our horses and drivers and trainers do cross the border to compete, in stake races on both sides. So it'll be interesting to see when jurisdictions open up kind of one after the other, how that time frame works out for everybody.
Yeah, hopefully, I'm sure when in the beginning, it's, I don't think, we're going to be able to go to Canada or maybe even some of the states either. But, hopefully by midsummer and especially late summer and fall time, that things will be okay and everybody wherever.
And speaking of racing, let's rewind to last year, 2019. You had a phenomenal year. You earned over $3.1 million, 67 wins, and just shy of a training average of 400, which is great. So what are some of your favorite memories from 2019?
Well, it was a probably I was Hamiltonian day. We didn't win the Hamiltonian or the Hamiltonian Oaks. Millie's Possession was second in it and raced great. But the horses just all really raced good. Crystal Fashion, he won the Cashman. Was really good that day, and Real Cool Sam winning the Peter Houghton. Sherryman's Lady was second in the Jim Doherty, and Cantab Fashion. He didn't have a year that we were hoping that he would have, but he did qualify for the final, and I thought that was a feat in itself for him just to make it to the final. Well, that was a really good day for us, and we had some good racing in the Pennsylvania Sire Stakes throughout the year too. But overall, I think we had more horses go out and be competitive in big stake races than I've had in some previous years.
And your overall accomplishments, we just saw on that chart there, you have earned over 63 or 46, $1 million in purses. That is amazing, especially because you've almost been you've been a private trainer for Jules Siegel. So what are your career accomplishments are you particularly proud of? So you mentioned a few from last year. Does anything over your whole career stand out for you?
Well, obviously, winning the Hamiltonian tag debut, which I believe is going to be 25 years ago. It was just an unbelievable day, to win that race. For me, I felt like I was, the Rangers had won the Stanley Cup the year before, and to me, that felt like Marc Messier holding up the Stanley Cup. It was just, my mom and dad and my wife and, John's wife, Paula, and all the girls. And, I think my dad, he enjoyed it more than anybody else. I'll tell you a funny story with my dad. John crossed the finish line, and my dad, he comes down, and it was in the old paddock at the Meadowlands. There was people all over, and he comes out and onto the racetrack. And one of the guards went to stop him, and he said, "My two boys just won the Hamiltonian. I'm going out there." And they didn't stop him. He was, it was probably one of his best days of his life. But well, he did say that it was. But it was just, special. For Jules and Arlene, I'd just been training for a year. Jules had invested money over the years, business and race like that, and for tattoo out, like I had nothing. I was fortunate enough that Jules hired me back in '94. Tagler was a 2-year-old, and I only trained him once, and he was a big colt that just needed to fill out. So we turned him out, but Jules picked him out himself. So that gave Jules an extra, special feeling on the colt that he went to the sale and picked out himself, and then it was just the whole day was remarkable. Another one for me. This is going back a ways, but in 1987, Jake Lobel, he was undefeated. He had won 18 races in a row. And we had a horse that Sandy Farber had bought. and the name of the horse was Run the Table. And they never got into the same division of the sire stake. And Jake Lobel was not going to stick around for the final. He was going to go somewhere else. So the Meadowlands added another 100,000. So it was a $200,000 final. And Run the Table beat him that night. And Tom Durkin, I can still hear his stretch call, and like it was just to win that night and to be the first horse to beat Jake Lobel was something special. And Sandy, I trained horses for him right up and till the time he unfortunately passed away in 2004. And his son Scott has had horses with me since then. And Scott has Run the Table stable. He named his stable after Run the Table. And so, those two races, stand out the most. Galleria winning the Breeders' Crown final as a 3-year-old, and Colonial was one that was really special. Robert Donna winning the Kentucky Futurity in Lexington, and then coming back and winning the Breeders' Crown at the Meadowlands. There'd be a whole lot more that I'd be missing out, but those ones stand out the most.
And it's amazing that, you've had a hand in some of those incredible wins. You're very lucky to have a career like that so far.
Well, I feel I'm very blessed, but I'm also blessed to have probably the two best teachers that anybody could ever ask for if they wanted to be in the horse business. And that was, starting with my dad. And then from my dad, I went to so those two, they were my foundation and taught me everything. And, I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for those two.
And speaking of sitting here and talking about past races and past horses, let's get into some of your current ones. So how many horses are you training right now? And out of those, how many are 2-year-olds?
Right now we have 40, and 2-year-olds we have 22, I believe, altogether, 2-year-olds.
So for your 22 2-year-olds, some were purchased as yearlings at sales and others were homebreds. Do you know the ratio between the two?
I believe there's 10 homebreds between, 10 homebreds, yes.
Okay, so let's get right into your 2-year-olds. The first one that we're going to talk about is Fortrude Fashion, a Father Patrick filly you got at the Harrisburg sale for $250,000.
She's a real natural. She's good gaited. She broke in. She's just one of those ones sets her head down low. Gets over the ground really good. We've been very happy with her training down, and we have high hopes for her. Anytime you're training these babies down, they have to make that transition from training to racing, which sometimes they surprise you in good ways and bad ways. But she's been really good from day one, and we have a lot of high hopes for her.
Let's move on to your Muscle Hill Colt, Beyond the Hill. You got at Harrisburg for $300,000 out of Beyond Blue.
He's a real good moving colt. Jeff Snyder bought him. He has partners with Arthur Pronti and Jeff's son Michael, and he's really filled out to be a real strong made colt. Got a real nice strong hind end on him, and he's been going right along since day one. And again, we have a lot of high hopes for him too. He hasn't done anything that we don't like. So hopefully everything will go smooth. As like I said, it's a big transition from training to racing, and I'm hopeful that the ones that are going good will make that transition.
Let's move on to Glacier Hanover, Father Patrick Colt out of Global Desire you got for $470,000 at Harrisburg.
Yes, Jeff and his son Michael, they own him, and he's really growing and filling out. He's a real fantastic looking colt. He's big, got strong. He's well proportioned. he moves good. He acts like he's got some quick speed to him. And so far with him, everything has been going good. He's got a good disposition about him. He can be full of himself at times, and then you walk by a stall another time, and he'll be sacked out, sound asleep. And I always like to see that in a horse that likes to rest in the stall a lot, and he does that. But he can be a handful. His caretaker will attest to that. But he's doing everything that we're asking of him right now.
I've heard before that good horses take care of themselves, and that is resting in their stall, hopefully more times than not. So we'll look forward to seeing him this summer and into the fall. And let's move on to Fashion on a Star, another Father Patrick colt you got at Lexington for $120,000.
Yes, the man you see there in the picture is the one who owns him. Jules bought him. We picked him out in Lexington, and he's been going really good too. Actually, he trains in with Glacier Hanover and Beyond the Hill as well. Those colts have been my top colts training. He's really filling out nice and well proportioned, and has good attitude and has a real good way of going. Very, very happy with the way he's progressing so far.
And your Lexington Select sale for $65,000, Cricket Fashion, as a Muscle Hill colt.
We have some that are maybe a little more flashier gaited than he is, but this colt, he's just got like a great attitude. He loves to be out there. He loves training, and he loves digging in. He gets very competitive with other horses, and he's just got a real cool attitude about him. And so far he's doing what we're asking of him. And like I said, there's some maybe a little flashier looking than he is, but he's just got a great attitude. Really like his whole disposition.
Let's talk about your Father Patrick filly, another out of Anywhere with You, Lexington, $150,000, called Sister Christina.
She's one that John Florin, him and his team, they pick out all their own yearlings. So I can't take any credit for picking her out or anything, but she's fantastic. She sets her head down, gets over the ground, no wasted action, and she's been super since day one. Really, really good way of going. Very, very happy with her.
Moving on to your creatine colt, Take All Commerce. Now this is a homebred.
Yeah, Scott Farber, which is run the Table Stable, he bred him. He's out of a mare called Nantab, and Scott had a Sebastian K filly last year that won the matron final in 53 and a piece down in Dover. And he was one, like when he came in, he was just ordinary looking, but after a couple months he started filling out, and he really started taking shape, and he was a natural pretty much from day one. He moves good and does everything well. We know the mare has thrown some speed off of the filly that we have last year, which she's coming back again this year. So hopefully he has her speed, and he's a big, strong colt. Hopefully he can carry it, and he can do some good for us.
Can you tell us about your bar hopping filly, Paint by the Numbers, you got at Lexington for $52,000?
You broke up there. I didn't hear you. Paint
sorry.
by Numbers. That's okay. I didn't hear what you said, but I see the picture. I'm sorry. Yeah, she's one actually. Scott bought her in Lexington, and she's been a real good mannered, good gaited filly. She's done everything that we've asked of her, and so far she's been coming along really good. And hopefully they can stay the course.
And how about your first crop, Always Be Mickey? You have a filly named Catamaran Fashion.
She comes from a great family. Jules bred her. She's out of Galley by the Beach, who Galley by the Beach was out of Galleria, so she's very strong on the dam side, good family, and she's got a great attitude, very good gaited. She's growing. She's bigger than what I thought she would be, but she's got a really good way of going, and she has a super attitude. So we've been very happy with the way she's been progressing.
Now, what can you tell us about your Trixton colt called Cool Tricks?
He's a half brother to Real Cool Sam, and having trained the families all the way back to the Grand Dam in that family, he fits the bill for a lot of them. He's not like, he wasn't a real easy colt to break in, only because he's so full of himself. Which Real Cool Sam was the same way too when we broke him in. But he's got a lot of talent. He's got high speed. He's the type of colt that you go all day. He doesn't, and you're not going to tire him out. That's for sure, because he'll be training along, and he just might be looking at something else, and then he'll come back and focus on training. And but he puts everything together. By the time we come to the races, I think he'll be a real good colt.
And how about your Broadway Dawn is a colt, another homebred here?
He's a full brother to Broadway Donna, and he's a really good looking colt. He's magnificently built. He's got a nice strong hind end, good shoulder to him, and gets over the ground really good. He's a little bit, not far, but just a little bit behind some of the other ones, only because he missed a little time. He got sick over the winter time. But he's got a real good gait and shows that he should have some good high speed to him. So I think if all things go well for him, hopefully he can be as competitive as his sister was.
And your last but not least on your list for this evening for 2-year-olds, your Cantab Hall Filly Evening Stroll.
She's a homebred that Tony Holmes and Walter and June Zent own, and I'd never met them before. Kenny Jackson and Bob Brady introduced me to them in Lexington last year. They said they had a homebred, and I looked at her, and she was a nice looking filly. And so they asked me if I wanted to train her, and I said, yeah, I would give her. I didn't know what to expect because I didn't see her move in the field or anything like that. And she broke in like a real natural. She's got a real nice way of going. She's very light on her feet, has a real low, goes with her head really low. And I always like that when a trotter can do that. And again, so far, everything's going good. And hopefully, we can transition this good training into some good racing.
Now for your 2-year-olds, how do you train them down, starting from breaking them down all the way to, getting them ready and fit for the races, minus our little hiccup this spring, but they would be almost getting ready for baby races now. What would your usual training down look like?
Well, we do the basic when they come in from the sale or from the farm. Depending on the horse, we'll line drive them. If they go good, we'll line drive them a couple days, and then if they act good, we'll hook them. But once they're all hooked, I like to get them in sets right away as soon as they're not going on any third lines, just so they get used to following and have horses beside them. And we do that a lot with them. Even now, we'll jog them in sets together just so that they always get used to, having the horse either in front of them or behind them or beside them. And then we don't really start going training miles till usually 1st of February, but through January we'll start, even end of December, we'll start like brushing them quarters and halves and stuff like that, just getting them ready for when February comes. And then we start off just going one trip with them, and then now we're like, if we're going fast with them, we'll go double headers. I'm not big anymore on going 2 singles or anything like that. If we're going to train them fast, we'll go a double header. Usually we'll go The first trip will go the wrong way, and then bring them in, throw bikes on them, and go their last trip. If they're just going on a slow day, then we'll train them just a slow 1.5 miles. Sometimes we like to train them 2x2 when they go on a slow day. So somebody sits on 2 of them on the outside and 2 inside, and just do all different types of, put them in different positions. When we start going a little faster in the bikes, usually Jeremy Morrison is my assistant trainer. I'll usually have him cut it to the quarter, and then I'll move one, just so that they get used to moving and then take up a little bit, and just try to give them all the experiences that they would normally get in a race, so that it's not all new to them. And their main focus is just to have them mannered. If you have one you put on the front end and you can't let a horse go because they're too grabby, then they're going to burn out, and they're not going to make any money for very long if they do. So the manners in the gate, that's the main thing that we're trying to focus on.
And for your horses, do you usually train a mile, 1.5 miles? Do you ever go a little bit longer than a mile? Some trainers do. Some trainers just prefer the mile.
We normally train 1.5 miles. For the most part, we'll train 1.5 miles. And then depends on the horse and what we're training them for. We'll usually let them come the last eighth pretty good and let them stretch out a little bit. But I would say 98% of the time we are going 1.5 miles with them.
Thank you for an insight on your 2020 freshman. We'll be back after this commercial break, and after the show, make sure everyone checks out Preferred Equine's new website at preferredequine.com.
At Preferred Equine Marketing, we've got you covered. From representing you at the yearling and mix sales, to taking you to winner circles around the globe. Preferred sale graduates like these champions come from putting the great horses we're privileged to sell into the hands of the best buyers in the business. Reach out to Preferred and let us cover you with success.
Welcome back. So we wrapped up your 2-year-olds. Let's get into some of your racehorses, the ones coming back for their 2020 campaign season. The first one we're going to talk about is Real Cool Sam. So it's your Dan Patch winner. And how does he look in preparation for his sophomore year?
He's coming back good. We weren't in any hurry with him. It was part of the plan right from the beginning. So we're not looking to qualify him, as soon as they open or when they open. The main thing that we want to prep them and have them ready for the Hambletonian, and then whatever happens after that. But so far everything comes back. He's coming back good. He's got so much talent and everything like that we're just taking our time with him, and also waiting to see what the schedule is going to look like too once we do reopen.
Of course, you said he has a lot of talent. What do you most love about him?
He's very versatile. You can race him. He can race either way. You can race from behind. You can race in front. You can race him first over. I think that's his. One of his main things that makes him good is that he doesn't have to race one way. You can race him any way you want.
And he is named after the late Sam McKee. Do you have a favorite Sam McKee story?
Yes, I do. It was back around 2009, somewhere in there. We had a horse, Fashion Delight, that won the Woodrow Wilson, and Jules and Arlene weren't able to make it to the track that night. And Jules called me after the race and asked me if I could get a DVD made up for him and Arlene to see the race again. And I said, sure. So I didn't even know who to call. So I called up to Sam. And I said, Sam, I need a DVD of the race for Arlene and Jules. He says, no problem. I was expecting he's going to say, stop back next week and I'll have it for you. I said, wait 2 races race, I'll have it ready for you. I was like, sure. So I went up to his announcer's booth, and Sam had the DVD all ready to go, and and then him and Jules is the one who obviously after Sam, and they had a great rapport with themselves, and he was just a really great guy, and this.
That's a great story, how quickly he turned around that for you. It's amazing kind of what they can do, those announcers. They've got their hands in everything, and he definitely was a great one. Let's move on to Crystal Fashion. So he's coming back for her 5-year-old year. She earned over $1 million at 3 and over 500,000 at 4. So how has she looked in preparation for this season?
He's coming back really good. He he looks great. He filled out, from 4 to 5, and he's ready to go as soon as we got a place to qualify him. And but very happy with the way he's come back. He's kind of a funny horse. Like he doesn't really care a whole lot about training. But when you put him in with other horses, then he gets competitive. And when you go out and jog him in the mornings, he's like, we sometimes call him a grumpy old man, because sometimes he'll hump around. He'll never kick or anything. And some days, if everything goes good, he goes out there and jogs along, and he doesn't give you doesn't hump at you. But he's a really cool horse to be around when he's. We have everything in sets, whether they're jogging or training, and I write out a schedule every day. The other day I was jogging him, and wasn't quite ready, but I walked by his stall, and he started nickering like, "Okay, I'm ready to go. Let's go." And he's just like a real cool horse. And and Ann Mosner, his caretaker, has taken care of him, since he was a 2-year-old. The two of them, they're a great team. Ann's done terrific job on him, and the horse he looks great.
Yeah, the caretakers make a huge impact on our horses in our everyday lives. So it's amazing that when they have that connection with a horse and get along so well, and can ride the up wave with us.
They're definitely the unsung heroes of this game. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of good caretakers work for me over the years, and the work and dedication that most of them put into their horses is it's unbelievable. And they're definitely the unsung heroes. We definitely couldn't do it without them, for sure.
Absolutely. So last fall, you had a doubleheader win at Lexington on Grand Circuit Week with Sherry's Lynn Lady and Madame Sherry. So the first one we're going to talk about is Sherry Lynn's Lady. She showed tremendous promise at 2 and earned over 300,000. How do you think she'll do this year coming into 2020?
She's coming back really good. Very very happy with the way she's been training back. The only race we were really disappointed in her was the Breeders' Crown elimination, and there really wasn't anything wrong with her. I think she just the end of the year it just kind of caught up with her a little bit, but she's got a real tough attitude to her. And when we baby raced her, Tim Tetrick he drove her, and he drove her most of her starts, and he really liked her right from day one when he baby raced her. And she's got that fight to her. Like she likes to fight horses off, and she's got a lot of quick speed and good gaited, and gets over the ground really good. And like I said before, like both Sherry Lynn and Madam Sherry, John Florin and his team, they picked them out. I was just fortunate enough that they picked me to train them. They're both of them are very very good gaited fillies, and nice fillies to be around. But John and his team, they did all the homework and picked them out.
They're both Father Patrick fillies. So moving on to Madame Sherry, she earned 125,000 last year. And what do you like about her, and how is she shaping up for this year?
She's, if you would have asked me before I baby raced them, which one would do better, I probably would have told you Madam Sherry. But she's good gated. She's got a good attitude as well. She ran into some bad luck. She first sire stake at the Meadows. She got hit in the eye with a piece of stone dust, and she lost over a month. She almost lost her eye. It was really bad. We had to send her to the hospital, and they had to, with medication and everything like that. But it just took a long time for it to heal up. And it was the first sire stake race right first part of July, so she lost some valuable time. And she raced super in Lexington, and I think one of her best races she went that probably went unnoticed by a lot of people except us who were involved with her was the Breeders' Crown final. She had the 10 hole. She sat 10th the whole way. Matt Kikali drove her, and Matt got off the bike. Like she finished 4th, and she was full of trot. And Matt said if he had a clear shot somewhere in the race to get, especially in the stretch, he said, I know I'd easily been second. And she's got a great determination. She likes to fight off horses, and both fillies are, hopefully they'll come back and improve of what they did last year.
We definitely look forward to seeing them this year as 3-year-olds. Let's move on to your Muscle Hill colt named Beyond Chronos. And he's also 3, and he earned about $130,000 last year at 2. What do you like about him?
He's he's got a good attitude. He's got some high speed. He went a really good race in the final of the kindergarten. He finished second from the outside his last start of the year. He went a couple good races in Lexington. He won 3 or 4, I think, in Pennsylvania with some Stallion Series races and a couple other races. He's one that we kind of brought him along a little slow, but he's got high speed to him, and he grew and filled out from last year. So hoping that he'll carry that speed further. And the way he showed us last year, he showed us a lot of talent. So hopefully he can step up from there.
And you have a credit winner gelding named Hobbs that won just once last year in 2019, but he did earn over $100,000. So how is he coming along for his 2020 campaign?
He's coming along really good. We actually we had him in a little bit earlier because Scott Farber owns him. He wanted to race him in the Dexter, and then all the COVID-19 thing happened, and then the Dexter ended up being canceled. But he's ready to qualify whenever there's a place to qualify. But he really grew and filled out a lot, and he was very good gated colt and good mannered, and I think he should be a lot better this year. He did go some good races. There were New York Sire Stakes. There were some tough colts in there last year, and he raced pretty much every week with them. He did win the one up in Saratoga and looked good doing it. But he's just one. I think he's got a lot of upside to him.
And I know you mentioned it before, but it's 25 years ago since you won the Hambletonian with a Tagliabue. So you talked about those memories with your brother and your father. We have a replay here, and just watching this, kind of tell us your feelings as you were watching a trainer on the stretch drive here.
Well, I was watching John's whip, and his whip never moved off his shoulder. So I'm thinking that means he feels good to John. And, right in here, Jules was standing beside me, and I didn't realize how excited I was getting. I had my arm around Jules. I didn't realize I was literally choking him. And when the race was over, I looked at him, and his face was all red. And I did just from the adrenaline and excitement. But, we were both so happy and excited. We were standing right down by the finish line. And it was just the exciting moment, just watching him come down. But the big thing, I was just watching John's whip, and I saw his whip stay on his shoulder. I was like, that's a good sign. He's got lots of trot, and John's just sitting there with him, and and it was just an unbelievable day.
And you had mentioned your father being overly joyed that day as well. He was a great horseman. And what did you most learn from your father?
When I was, I don't know, it was probably about 10 or 12, um, I did something wrong getting a horse ready, and I was all mad at myself. And my dad, he set me aside. He said, "Don't worry about making a mistake." He said, "If you do something wrong, learn from it." He said, "If you beat yourself up every time you make a little mistake," he said, "you'll never go forward." And the other thing that he always told us was, if when I was younger and that, I would say to him, "I'm never going to do this," or "I'm never going to go there," and he'd always say never, because never is a long time. And he also taught me too that when you go dealing with race offices and judges and everything like that, he said you go in there with respect. He said you won't get any respect unless you go in there with respect. And there's a whole working with my dad. It was I just loved working with him, and he was such a great person to work with. Um, he just was so easygoing, and like I said before, if he did something wrong, he didn't like lose his cool and start yelling. He'd tell you what was wrong, and then he'd tell you, "But don't be doing it again." So it's just nothing but great memories of working with my dad. He was a great teacher, and best of all, he was a great dad.
Some great advice as well that he's given you and your brother over the years. What would be one of your first memories with the horses?
Um, well, my first one was first time I jogged the horse. I was 8 years old, and our farm was my grandfather's farm was the one that had the track on, so we had to jog them down the road to my grandfather's. And you never know what you were going to meet when you're taking a horse down there. It could be a school bus coming, or it could be a big tractor or something like that. I remember I was nervous, but I was happy that I did it. And then the first time I went a training mile, I was 9, and I was training with John. And so he said, "Just follow me. Don't move off my back. Just follow me." And so I had no clue where we were starting or finishing or anything like that. So I followed him. The horse I had, he was grabbing on. Time we were done, I was like out of breath. I could hardly hold the horse, and we pulled up, and he looked at me and he goes, "You had no clue how many times we were going around, did you?" I said, "Nope, I was just following you."
Another great story. I'm sure you have, we could do a whole show just on stories of you and your brother John with the horses. But speaking of working with the horses and those family connections, can you tell us about how you became connected with Mr. and Mrs. Siegel and how long you've trained for them and their family?
It was in 1994. I was only training 5 horses. Um, I had a bunch more than that, but things just didn't go the way that I anticipated. So I was down to 5 horses, and I was walking through the paddock one night, and Jules and Arlene were walking by, and Jules said, "How many horses are you training?" And I said, "5." And he didn't say nothing else. And then a couple days later, because we were stabled at Gateway, we were actually in the barns were side by side, and he came over and asked me if I'd be interested in training his horses and going to work for him. And I told him I was, and he said, "Well, you think about it over the weekend and let me know on Monday." So I called him Monday and said that I would like to go to work for him and train his horses, and that was in August of '94, and we've had some run. It's been a great run.
Absolutely. And you've trained dozens of phenomenal horses. As you could only pick a couple that you could be remembered by, which would those be?
Wow. um, Dial or No Dial, Broadway Donna, Run the Table, Galleria, Real Artist, Those ones are the main ones that come to my mind. I know I'll think of a whole bunch more tonight, but those ones would be, and obviously Tagliabue. I don't know if I said him before or not, but obviously Tagliabue, he was real special. Millie's Possession, she's one that unfortunately, I think we had planned on bringing her back this year, but after she broke her coffin bone in the Breeders' Crown elimination and still winning the race too. I think if that didn't happen to her, she was just one of the gutsiest fillies I've ever trained. And I was up at the farm back in April, and Dave Alwell, the farm manager, was just showing me some of the horses, and I went in to see her, and she came right out to the stall. I think if I would have said, "You're going back into training, girl," she would have been happy. She just got just the greatest attitude of a horse that you could ever want.
It is some of those that have the greatest attitudes are great horses. Sometimes not so much, but they do pull on our heartstrings in different ways.
Yeah, she was definitely one of them. And Anne, who takes care of Crystal Fashion, she took care of her all the time too. And they were a good fit together.
So regardless of talent for your horses, is there one that would be your favorite to train?
I probably have to pick Broadway Donna. She was so cool to be around. She was tough. She wouldn't let me in the stall. If I went to go walking into the stall, she'd line me up and put me in the corner. I could never go in there and catch her. But on the track, she was just she was she was in competition mode all the time, and she got to the point we'd jog her in behind another horse because sometimes she'd get a little too racy, and then on her last lap we just let her go stretch out a little bit just for a eighth of a mile, and she just loved it. She would stretch herself out, and then she knew she was coming off, she'd take herself to the outside of the track and then just walk off, and she was just a real cool horse to be around.
Oh, you've had a hand in some great horses, as we've talked about, and hopefully a few more coming up this summer for their freshman campaign. But what is still on your racing bucket list?
Well, I definitely would like to win the Kentucky Futurity for trotting colts. I've never won the Meadowlands Pace yet either. That would be, but I'd like to do the Hambletonian and the Hambletonian Oaks again. I would, if I couldn't win any of the other two, I wouldn't mind winning those two again. When you win a race at the Meadowlands, especially if it's a Hambletonian or a Hambletonian Oaks, it's just a real special feeling. If you gave me a wish list, those would be the top two that I would like to try to win again.
And that wraps up our questions, but we had some viewer questions that were sent in earlier. So the first one comes from Scott Farber, and he says, Jim Campbell has been training for my family for 33 years. I had the pleasure to meet his late father one afternoon at Freehold. What a wonderful, classy man Jack was. My question is, what is the biggest influence your dad had on you? So we spoke a little bit about him with you. Is there a big influence that he had that we haven't spoke about?
Well, when I first went to the racetrack when I was working for my dad, I just was around him all the time. It goes back to the respect. He always, even people that you other trainers and that, he said, just be respectful. And then with your horses, he just was always like, feed them well, take good care of them, do what's right for them, and hopefully they'll reward you somewhere along the way. My dad was, he kind of kept it simple, in which I've tried to do that. I can't do it like my dad. My dad was way more. He handled things way better than I can. But he was just an all around. A lot of people had respect for him, and he wasn't. He was just being himself. He was just, John and I and my sister Joanne. We were blessed to have a dad like him, and and him and my mother. Both of them. They were both or my mother was involved. She'd go to the races when we were younger, and they were just always, I think they brought us up in a good way, and they just kind of kept their life simple, but very, very respectful.
That's great to hear. And our next question, two questions from Jeffrey Canteen. The first one asks, when it comes to training babies, who had the biggest influence on your career, and what did you learn from them that you still use today?
Well, that would go to my brother John. He taught me um, more especially with the trotters than anybody else did. I had the pleasure to work with Glenn Garnsey back in the early '83 and '84, and Glenn was a top-notch horseman. But what John taught me was, training for today's world, and how to have them rigged up right and to get the most speed. And not just that, John was, to me, there was nobody better than get off the bike after a race and say, I think this horse is off here. You should pay a little attention to this, or give you an idea of something to change, the way the horse was steering or anything like that. And he taught me more, especially about racing stake races and getting horses ready for big races than anybody else had. And he was so sharp, like when he knew other horses that he wasn't driving, just by, he paid such close attention to everything, and he would see them on the track, whether it was post parading or in the race and stuff like that. And he just was, he was very sharp. And one of the things that I learned, it was back, we were still at Garden State. It was probably around 1989, somewhere in there. And I had six green 3-year-olds ready to qualify that we were getting ready for the Meadowlands. So it was in December, and John was going to come down and qualify them. And something came up where he couldn't come down. And so I ended up going with them myself. And I called John afterwards and I said, boy, am I ever glad that you didn't come down. He said, why? I said, because I had to I said, they all went different in the race than what they did training. And he started laughing, and he goes, I told you about that. They don't always do the same thing in a race as they do training. And that's true. Like, you think they're going to go a certain way in training, but racing is totally different. And you don't know what's going to happen. You get surprised, both good and bad.
For sure. I'm sure a ton of people have a ton of respect and have been influenced by your brother as much as you have as well. Our next question comes from Jeffrey again, and he asks, during the past few years, approximately how many babies have you started with, and on average, how many make it to the races at 2? For those that don't make it, is it more due to lameness issues or lack of ability?
We've been fairly fortunate. I would say, percentage-wise, I would say we're like around 95% make it to the races. Of that 95, some might only race a couple times. The most common reason why we stop with one, either after a couple races or even that they don't make it, is they could be just a little too growthy. I've had a filly this year that I stopped with a month ago just because she was too growthy, and it just didn't make any sense to keep on training her. She just needs some time to fill out and develop more. And then the other is lack of ability. We're stabled in New Jersey, and you're trying to race. If you're racing any sire stakes that you race anymore is a Grand Circuit race because the competition's so tough. So if they're not good enough for even the second level of a sire stake program of any state, at least for around this area, they're not going to make any money for the owner, and they're not really going to do a lot of good for anybody around here. Now, there is a market for horses like that people will wait on them. They probably, give them a 5 or 6 months off, and then start them back at a track where they're not going to be as tough a racing, and they make good race horses. So there's usually a horse for somebody, but the ones that are a little slow or lacking of ability, they just don't work here for us in New Jersey, for what we're trying to do.
And our next question comes from Charles Foster, and he asks, do you ever miss your old pizza joint, Jimmy C's? And what was the best pizza you ever made?
Well, the first part of your question, Charles, no, I do not miss that. um, I was well warned by my wife's cousins who were or still are in the restaurant business, but I had it in my head that was something I wanted to try to do. So it's checked off my bucket list, not going back there to do it again. Um, it was a different business. I was used to working long hours in the horse business, but this year in a small confined little space for 15 to 18 hours a day is totally different than driving to a racetrack and racing and training. It's a total different thing. The best pizza that I made was one. It was actually my wife's favorite, and then my wife's nickname is Duke, so it was called Duke's White Pie, and it was just a white pie, no sauce, a little fresh garlic, and a little fresh basil on top, and it was a big hit. A lot of people liked it, and I would say that was our. If you have one of those special, and they were all pretty good, but that one stood out more than any of the rest.
Now, once in a while, do you whip out those skills and make your wife the pizza?
No, she mentioned the other night we should make our own pizza, and I said, well, we don't have the right equipment to go make our own pizza, and it's a lot easier just calling up and ordering one.
That's true. That's true. One more question and one more pizza question. And this time it comes from Leo Harvey. And he asks, what was your biggest challenge as a pizza restaurant owner?
The biggest challenge was for me was if I was all staffed up on a Friday night with delivery drivers and people in the restaurant, for some reason we would be dead. If it was like on a Wednesday or Thursday and I just was lightly staffed for some reason, the place, there was people coming in calling up for deliveries, and we're scrambling around, which it doesn't do you any good, because people that if they had to wait a little too long, they're not going to call you back the next time. But the help and getting the amount of help at certain times, I had a hard time. You could never figure it out. You think you're going to be busy and you're all ready to go, and then you're not. So then you think on a Wednesday or Thursday it's going to be dead, and you get swamped. But it was different. I'm glad I did it, because it was something that I wanted to do. I got some good recipes out of it, because my wife's cousin has a really good restaurant in Red Bank, and he gave me all his recipes for the pizzeria. So I did come out of it with some good recipes.
Good to know. Good to know. So we're making connections for pizza orders. I like that. Um, we have a couple more questions from Facebook. The first one, we'll put it up here, and it comes from Rick, and he asks, what was your greatest memory of Run the Table?
What I said before, beating Jake Lobel in the New Jersey Sire State Final, that race, stands out. It's second behind Tagliabue winning the Hamiltonian. It was just an incredible night, and it was just I can tell you exactly where I was standing in the paddock. Like I just remember the night like it was yesterday. It was an unbelievable feeling. That was my greatest memory of Run the Table.
The final question we have, our second one from Facebook, comes in. And Jim, is it true that you could never get up in time for school? From Maria.
Well, it's not too hard to tell that she's working with my brother, and they do a lot of talking. So I'll let everybody know the story. My brother, who's 7 years older than I am, I would go to bed. I was probably like 7 at the time, and he would come in and wake me up at 11 o'clock at night and say it's time to get up to go to school. I just figured it was time to get up, so I'd get up and start brushing my teeth, and my mother would go, "What are you doing?" So I'm getting ready to go to school. She says it's 11 o'clock at night. But he says he got away with it a couple times, but he only got away with it once.
Okay. I have an older brother too, so I get that those sneaky things that they do. But any sibling rivalry that you and John have?
Oh, absolutely. Comes to hockey. He's a Devils fan and I'm a Rangers fan. And so it used to be, because when we were stabled at the Meadowlands, we used to go to a lot more games. I hardly go at all anymore, but we used to go, to the Garden. John and Freddie Grant had seasons tickets at the Meadowlands for the Devils, and John used to like to take me if he thought the Devils could beat the Rangers. But we had a lot of fun, going back and forth. But that's our only rivalry that we've ever really had. That was but it was all in good fun and everything like that.
Of course, of course. So thank you for joining us here on our virtual version of Twos in Training. And thank you for Preferred Equine for sponsoring our show this evening. And don't forget to check out their new website at preferredequine.com. We also have another edition or a new edition of Harness Racing Update tomorrow. So be sure to check out the headlines. And we have Mark Stacey on Saturday. I'll be interviewing him, and we have Irv Miller and Heather will be interviewing him on Monday. So thanks again, Jim, for joining us here on Twos in Training.
Thank you, Jamie, and thanks to Dave Reed for sponsoring this with Preferred Equine. Thank you very much.
Harness Racing Update is the sport's most comprehensive and trusted news source and the fastest growing publication in the game. HRU has you covered with award-winning features and commentary from some of the sport's best writers. Stellar photography, race news, results, entries, handicapping, and video replays. The industry's most comprehensive sales results and Harness Racing's best reader feedback section. And it's all delivered free of charge to your email box multiple times each week. See why HRU is the most trusted news source of the sport's most important people from all facets of the industry. Subscribe today for free. To subscribe, just go to harnessracingupdate.com and then click subscribe for free.